This is Salesforce Simplified, the podcast from Victoriam Solutions. Here's your host, Mike Boyle.
So, are you with me on this? There's nothing more that I'd like to talk about in the middle of winter here in the Northern Hemisphere than spring. And to that end, we have invited back to the Salesforce Simplified podcast our Salesforce Release guru, AdVic's Revenue Cloud practice lead, Aaron Chamblee, to talk about some of his favorite new features in the upcoming Salesforce Spring 22 release. And we have him here on the podcast, as many of you know, 3 times a year for the Salesforce releases, spring, summer, and winter. Hello, Aaron. Welcome back. Happy 2022.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me back, and Happy New Year to you and everyone listening.
You know, Aaron, before we get into talking about some of the new features in the Salesforce Spring 22 release that you'll be calling out here, I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about the hot topic in the Salesforce world, especially at this current time as we record this podcast, and that's multi-factor authentication. I believe that's kicking in on February 1st, 2022. Can you give us an update? Tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So that is a big update that will be pushed as part of the Spring 22 release. So starting in February, everyone will need to have some form of multi-factor authentication, or MFA, as you'll see it online a lot, enabled for their Salesforce org. This shouldn't come as too much of a surprise because they've been alluding to it and even saying they would enforce it last year, but now it's actually going to be enforced starting February 1st. So if you haven't started looking into this yet, I highly recommend you jump on it. You don't want to be caught by surprise.
And as I always do, I will put a link here in the show notes directly to the Salesforce Spring 22 release notes. And if you do a search for multi-factor authentication, there's a bunch of little articles that'll pop up there for you and give you a little bit more information about that. So thanks for that, Aaron. And here we go. You have poured through the new features in the upcoming Salesforce Spring 22 release and highlighted the ones you are most excited about. We're focusing this time on automation and specifically flow, I understand. So let's take a look at these 6 particular release platform highlights. And we'll start with the first one. That's enable stronger protection for your users' personal information. What's behind that one?
Yes. So just like we were talking about with the MFA requirement, there have been a number of new features to increase the security within your Salesforce org. One of these is this enabling stronger protection for the PII, or personal identifiable information. This is specifically for community, so think external users, not typically your internal employees, but anyone that you're having access a site tied to your Salesforce org. This permission can be turned on within the setup menu for different profiles, and it can even be customized with field sets in case you're using any custom fields that might qualify as PII information. This is a really good update, as it's always important, especially with the privacy laws, no matter where you're at, to make sure that you're protecting your users' information, and this simplifies the process. So be on the lookout for this one.
Number 2 on our Salesforce Spring 22 release call-out list here today is visualize all your record-triggered flows in one place with Flow Trigger Explorer. Tell me about that one.
Yes. So a big part of this update was also focused on automation. Normally we cover some more product-specific updates that are exciting, but with this one, the big focus is going to be on automation in general across the platform. Salesforce recently announced that all process builders and workflow rules will eventually be deprecated, and they're going to be coming out with a tool, which we'll briefly talk about later, to migrate these automation types to Flow. So if you're not comfortable with Flow already, you should definitely start learning, go out on Trailhead and start picking it up, because this will be the future. And this release specifically, the ability to visualize all of your record triggered flows, as these are going to become the one-stop for your automation. This is going to provide a nice way to debug and actually see visually everything going on for a single object within one view. So as we're going to be creating more flows in the future, this is also a way to manage them better. So it's really exciting to see this already coming out well in advance of the deprecation of the other automation tools.
Well, staying here in the flow world, my friend, number 3 on our list is filter items into a collection in Flow Builder. That sounds like an interesting one.
Yes. So this one, I know I am personally extremely excited for. Any flow aficionados out there know that when you're doing some very advanced automation and you need to get a bunch of records at one time and then sort through them to be able to act on specific sets, it can be a bit tedious in a flow today. However, with this update, there will be a single action you can put in there that will allow your flow to sort your collection and grab just the set within your overall collection that you want to act on. So this is really exciting, and it just continues to show the power of Flow as the go-to declarative automation tool.
Gotcha. Folks, you're listening to the Salesforce Simplified podcast from Victoriam Solutions. I'm Mike Boyle, and with us today is AdVic's Revenue Cloud Practice Lead, Aaron Chamblee. We are talking about the Salesforce Spring 22 release and some of the highlights he's calling out today. We're to number 4 on our list of 6 today, and that is define the run order of record-triggered flows for an object. What's in that one?
So as we continue to kind of go with the flow here, this one builds on the visualization of your record-triggered flows. So prior to this update, if you built a record-triggered flow, you had a couple options for how to define when it runs. And while that was great, as we were moving into putting everything in flow, you wanted to make sure that your single piece of automation is doing a specific task rather than it being the go-to for everything down a long chain of requirements. This will let you specify different business goals for each flow and then order them in there for the order of operation to make sure that if you need one piece of business logic to run before another, you can now do so and then visualize it in the Flow Trigger Explorer we were previously talking about. So another awesome update for Flow.
I'm not going to take credit for this, so we're going to continue to go with the flow, which Aaron threw out at me the other day when we were doing the prep for this podcast. Number 5 on our list is convert workflow rules to flows with the Migrate to Flow tool. A lot of flowing in there, Aaron.
That there is. So this last one is a beta feature. However, with this change coming, automation is a big part of any, especially the more mature Salesforce orgs out there. So I would recommend, if you're an admin with some time, to go ahead and start looking at this tool and trying to convert your workflow rules. It's better to get to these things sooner than later. The last thing you want is to come up on the day when they actually do deprecate the workflow rules and then hope that everything converts the way you would expect. So this is a really good way to go ahead and get ahead of that.
Well, I can't believe that the word flow is not in our 6th and final call out here, the Salesforce Spring 22 release. It's called Set Organization-Wide Sharing for Products. This is a release update. Tell us about that one.
Yes, so this one is not automation focused, but going back to securing your data. Prior to Spring 22, you could not build organization-wide sharing defaults on the product object, but going forward, you will now be able to. I do want to note that sharing rules and manual sharing will still be unavailable for this object, but it's another way just to make your org more secure, especially if you have an external facing site, such as an Experience Cloud site, making sure that users can only see the records that you want them to be able to see. So,
and there we have it. We've gone with the flow. We've gone with the flow. Aaron, thank you so much, as always, for digging into this latest Salesforce release. It's the Spring 22 release, and I'm looking forward to having you back for the Summer 22 release. And I'm not going to sit here and laugh about it because it's going to be just weeks from now, really.
Yep. Looking forward to being back.
Excellent. Can't wait for it. And for the audience, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what Aaron and I have been talking about here, the Salesforce Spring 22 release, it's just jam-packed with a whole bunch of highlights and features in addition to what we spoke about here. I'm going to be placing links in this show's episode notes for you to help you dive in a little bit more into what Aaron was speaking about, and also a little bit more about, as I mentioned earlier, and Aaron spoke about, the multi-factor authentication. So that'll all be here in the show notes for you. Hey, is this the first time you are listening to our podcast? If so, thank you so much. And make sure you follow us on your favorite podcast channel. Get all the past and future episodes, of course. Just hit the subscribe button on any of those services, and we'd appreciate you telling your friends and colleagues. And by the way, if you happen to be listening to us on Apple Podcasts and now Spotify, you can give us a 5-star review, give us a thumbs up, and we'd really appreciate any little accolades you give us on either of those services. Thank you so much. I'm Mike Boyle from AdVic. Thank you for joining us for today's latest Salesforce Simplified podcast. As always, our next episode is just around the corner.
You've been listening to Salesforce Simplified, the podcast from Victoriam Solutions.